Cory Hetherman is bringing his attacking and aggressive defense to South Florida, and here's why he chose to leave Minnesota for Miami.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and writer for Canes County at Rivals. And thank you so much to the Everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. On this loaded episode, there's a lot to talk about today. Miami did land a 2027 verbal commit last night. I know it's way down the road, but this is a really talented player Miami is adding to their commitment list. Akeem Mezador is going to play a final season for Miami this coming year. It's great to have him back. We'll talk about Carson Beck, his recovery from UCL surgery. We'll get a scouting report on Carson Beck on this episode. And yeah, we'll talk a lot about Cory Hetherman, new Miami defensive coordinator, because Coach Hetherman was officially introduced to the South Florida media yesterday. Mario Cristobal also spoke, not only to talk about hiring his new DC, but to also keep us up to date on a busy offseason and Carson Beck's arrival and so much more. And yet, right out of the gates, Tim Reynolds from the Associated Press, he asked Hetherman, I think it was the first question right out of the block, you know, you were in a good situation. I mean, he was defensive coordinator, Minnesota. That's a Big Ten program. Hetherman had actually just signed a contract extension on December 7th. So, you know, presumably he was planning to stay there. Miami's job becomes open. He becomes attracted to Miami's defensive coordinator job. So why leave and come down here? And Coach Hetherman said, and Hurricanes fans should take comfort in this, the opportunity to compete for national championships, he said, what the program is, what Coach Mario Cristobal has done here. And, you know, it's I think, a validation to the alignment that Miami has now organizationally, where you've got a university president in Joe Echeverria, who is all about athletics. You know, we've had some presidents over the years that don't necessarily prioritize football and athletics. Joe Echeverria absolutely does. And you have an administration that is willing to be aggressive financially and otherwise to do what it takes to get the right people here and try to win. And obviously Mario Cristobal is all about that. I know, say what you want to about Miami having a disappointing season and all that. Like, the bottom line, and Hetherman realizes this, the Miami Hurricanes in 2024, for all the disappointment we had to end the season, this team was literally one victory away from qualifying for the college football playoff. That if Miami, and a lot of this falls on the defense that he now gets to try and fix, if Miami had just been able to protect a 21-point lead in the final game against Syracuse, you would have been in the ACC championship game. And as we came to find out, you wouldn't have even had to win the ACC championship game to get into the college football playoff. So Miami was literally one W away from being in the college football playoff. And, you know, Hetherman being up in Minnesota, and obviously that program, it's in a bigger conference than Miami is in. I mean, the Big Ten is part of that power too, and the ACC is not. But there are, you know, program limitations being in a Big Ten school that is not one of those, you know, blue bloods like the Ohio States and the Michigans and now the Penn States of the world. And you think about the opportunity that you have being in South Florida to recruit not only elite talent across the board, but elite defensive players. I mean, there is opportunity here at Miami that, unfortunately for the Minnesota Golden Gophers, the opportunity is not the same over there. And when I talk about all the alignment that Miami has organizationally from the president's office on down, you know, a lot of folks in Minnesota are wishing that they would be willing to invest a little bit more because they have a habit of losing assistant coaches to other college jobs, even right after they sign extensions, which is what happened here with Cory Hetherman. Now, first of all, you know, we got a chance to see Coach Hetherman in person for the first time. I mean, For those who are watching this, the video version on our YouTube channel, you see that beautiful shiny bald head of his, that incredible beard. He looks like a Viking, and you see that stare that Coach Hetherman is directing at the South Florida media. I mean, if you play defense for this guy, the last thing you want to do is miss your assignment or miss your tackle, because you've got this guy staring at you. I love the intensity, and of course, we love the track record that Coach Hetherman has established, where this is somebody who, nothing handed to him. This was not a guy who was like the son of a great coach who got to, easily climb up the ranks. He had to work for everything that he got to the point where he's on Greg Schiano's staff a couple of years ago after being a defensive coordinator at James Madison, and he gets this opportunity to be last year the defensive coordinator at Minnesota, where he took over what was the 69th ranked defense in the country and got them inside the top 10 and inside the top 5 in some categories. That was a lightning fast turnaround from Coach Hetherman. As far as what Miami's new defensive coordinator is all about, he said, we're going to be aggressive. We want to be an attacking style defense. We're going to be very multiple. Everywhere I've been, it's go evaluate who is in the room, figure out how to plug it in from there. There's a lot of athletes, speed on the defensive side of the football. We're going to be an attacking, aggressive style defense, he says. And, he talked about how, like, his number one priority is to take the run away, because he mentioned great offenses can usually run the football and great defenses can stop the run. Number one goal is to stop the run and make the opposing offense one-dimensional. We want to play fast. We want to swarm, Coach Hetherman says. I don't want a lot going on. That's key. Line up, know my job, eyes in the right spot, and then go play fast, he says. That's the biggest thing. I told guys yesterday, got a chance to meet Miami players, that there are going to be mistakes, times that we're wrong. I don't care in spring football. Go learn from it, and that won't happen in the fall. So play fast, play swarming football, and keeping things simple. This is exactly what we need. It's exactly what Miami needs. And hopefully all of this. And again, Hetherman, I like the fact that he was able to, within 1 year, within one season, was able to transform Minnesota's defense from where they were the year prior. And he comes in pretty much in the same situation at Miami. When he took over that Minnesota defense the year prior, ranked 69th in America. Miami's defense ranked 69th nationally last year. Can he transform Miami quickly into a top 10 unit the way that he did with the Golden Gophers? But I love the idea of the simplicity, because you can't, when you've got the types of athletes that, some of which are already here, Miami's still working on adding more defensive depth. Mario Cristobal talked about that we're getting to the point where we have normal level depth on defense. That needs to continue, the talent acquisition side of it. But, when you've got the type of athletes Miami is capable of having on the defensive side of the football, the South Florida athletes, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to make things, overly complex and confusing. You need to attack and you need to swarm. Here's what Mario Cristobal said on Coach Hetherman. From my interaction with him and people I know and trust that he's worked with, I'm sure Greg Schiano is included in that, a tremendous human being, Cristobal said. An emphasis is on him being able to maximize the personnel he has. He made the best impression, felt he filled a need in the best way of any of the candidates in the country, he said. He is a guy that can elevate the standard of our defense. And I also I didn't even have to reach out to this guy, which was awesome, how he unsolicited, and I'm a huge fan of his. He's the Rob Kane, he's the former host of Locked On Golden Gophers. He still covers Minnesota on a daily basis for a different platform now. But Rob, who, covered Cory Hetherman, Rob was on the Locked On Network when Hetherman got hired by Minnesota about a year ago. And he reached out to me and he sent me like his scouting report on Hetherman and his defense. He says to me, you'll love Hetherman. He said he stresses playing fast, violent, and creating chaos. A 4-3 system that gives looks of a 4-2-5 a lot, as well as having the Sam typically be a safety, he says. He really leaned into Minnesota's safety room. Traditionally, we saw two lead guys play the whole game with Rossi, his predecessor. With Hetherman, we had probably 7 or 8 safeties see the field with a key core of 4 to 5 between the nickel and 2 deep. He said the linebackers were highly involved all over. He loved sending some cornerback blitz looks. our D-line pressure wasn't great and was down from the year before, but the room was more shallow for Minnesota last year. He says the dude is super calm under pressure, and he's smart. In an old episode, Rob sent me an old episode he did. I'll probably link that in the show description. Talked about his background on offense and then flipping to defense. And Hetherman talked about that yesterday, by the way, that his original background was on the offensive side of the football. He switched to coaching defense, thinking I'm going to learn more about defenses, coaching defenses for a few years, and then I'll bring that back over to the offensive side of the football. But added, I never went back over because he had so much success and such a rise on the defensive side. And then, Rob Kane, who reached out to me, finished it off saying the players in Minnesota loved playing for him. So that's a little taste of what Miami has to look forward to in Cory Hetherman, who's going to try to turn around Miami's defense as quickly as he did in Minnesota last year. And we have a lot more from Mario Cristobal, who was available to the media. It was the first time since right after the Pop-Tarts Bowl. We got an important piece of news on the recovery of Carson Beck from his UCL throwing elbow surgery. Want to share that with you guys. And we've got a lot to go, my friends. And also, I had a chance. I was hosting on WQAM this morning, filling in on the Joe Rose Show. And we actually interviewed on WQAM our Locked On colleague, Kyle Krabs from Locked On Dolphins and Locked On NFL Scouting. And I asked Kyle, who he scouts NFL prospects for a living, what his take was on Carson Beck, who was briefly declared for the NFL draft. So we're going to get a scouting report on Beck, Mario Cristobal's take on Carson's recovery, and so much more. Guys, you want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. 2025, we've only been in this month for 2 weeks, and I've already bought a ton of tickets on Game Time. I was buying some hockey tickets on there earlier today. Guys, on the Game Time app, which is the only ticket service that I use, you're getting the best deals, the best features, and when you sign up with our code Locked On College, you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Like, why not take a $20 discount for using Game Time? You get that when you use our code. And if you're going to be attending the championship game, college football playoff, Notre Dame and Ohio State, that's less than a week from now, you can get the best possible deals at Game Time. It's so exciting to go to these big games, bring your family together. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Guys, I love the all-in pricing feature. Shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. You want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On College, all one word, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I take you around the conference. We're still talking college football playoff because Notre Dame, they're not in the ACC officially in football, but they're ACC adjacent. So we're talking about the championship game and so much more. And last thing for Cory Hetherman, like we talk about the talent, and obviously I'm not going to say the only reason why Miami's defense was not up to par last year. I can't scapegoat Lance Guidry for all of it. I mean, Miami needs more depth of talent, and hopefully important defensive players can stay healthy this year because Ruben Bain missed some time last season. Damari Brown missed most of the year. Jadis Richard got hurt at the end of the season. So if I look at important defensive players, guys who returned from last year, foundational players that hopefully Cory Hetherman can get the best out of and help some of these players return to form or stay in form. And, hopefully these guys have returns to form. Ruben Bain is a big one. I mean, we know when Ruben is healthy and when everything is right, the guy is virtually unblockable, and he's the type of player opposing offensive coordinators have to specifically game plan for and keep in mind. It's huge that Akeem Mezador is coming back. That was something Mario Cristobal announced. Well, he didn't Actually, Akeem announced it on his social media, but Mario Cristobal confirmed it that Akeem is going to be back for what'll be his 6th collegiate season. And important to note, Akeem is going to be moving back out to the edge. Cristobal described Mezador as selfless because he played a lot in the interior this year, which is not his natural position. He's so much more dangerous, disruptive, and consistent on the edge. And that's going to be the role we're going to see Akeem Mezador playing in again next year. And so I'm very happy and very important because if Akeem were not coming back and trying to go on to the NFL, then, Miami would have a significantly less experience on that defensive line. So it's great that he's back. Guy like Wesley Besaint at linebacker, OJ Frederic at cornerback, who had an awesome true freshman season and will hopefully build on that. Players who can take a big step forward this coming season who are young and less experienced. Justin Scott and Ahmad Moten at defensive tackle, Malik Bryant on the edge, who we saw some really good flashes from last year. Marquise Lightfoot, hopefully he continues to put on weight because he's an awesome natural pass rusher. Cameron Bobby Pruitt at linebacker, Zaquan Patterson at safety, Damari Brown, who we barely saw last year because of his injury. So hopefully players like that are young and had their seasons affected by injury can step up and break out. And of course, Miami's brought in important transfers. Safety Zachariah Poyser, cornerbacks Charles Brantley, Ethan O'Connor, Emmanuel Carnley, defensive tackle David Blay. So there definitely is talent there. I think Miami still wants to add more depth. We'll see if the hostage in Wisconsin, Xavier Lucas, ever gets released up there because they're holding him, in my opinion, illegally. Based on what they see as an NIL deal that he signed. They won't let him go into the transfer portal. Hopefully that's resolved because Miami would love to add a player like that to their defensive secondary. So we need more depth and more consistent depth, but there definitely is talent there for Cory Hetherman to work with. All right, let's talk about Carson Beck, he's on campus. He's in South Florida. He got here on Saturday. He's been taking time to get to know his teammates. He's been studying film. He's taking the early steps into learning Shannon Dawson's offense and getting comfortable. Obviously, there's only so much that Beck can do right now because he's still, coming off of the surgery, the UCL surgery that he had, same doctor that performed a very successful surgery on Brock Purdy in the NFL. So right now, Beck is not able to throw and he can't go through full workout. So what does the timetable look like? Mario Cristobal said there's always hope. The sooner the better. We'll have more clarity in a couple of weeks, he said on Carson Beck's recovery. He says everything looks ahead of schedule, though, Cristobal added. For the summertime, everything is scheduled to be full throttle, full go. There is anticipation that it could happen earlier. So it's good to know that at the bare minimum, Carson Beck is going to be a full go by the summer, which is going to give him that jump on, quote unquote fall camp, which starts in August. So it's the summer, but that he'll be ready to go before fall camp begins, which is usually like the last day or two of July or the first week of August, that he's going to be fully ready to go by then. And Cristobal did leave the door open that it could happen even sooner. And listen, I know a lot of times people will laugh about how vague Cristobal is in discussing injuries, and if Cristobal tells you someone is close, that could mean they're months away and stuff. But when it comes to quarterbacks, you remember a lot of people doubted when Cristobal said a year ago at this time that Emory Williams, who was recovering from a broken arm, Cristobal said a year ago he'd be ready to go probably by spring football, and people were like, oh, okay, coach, spring of what year? 2026? And then sure enough, Emory Williams was ready to go by spring football last year, recovered ahead of schedule. So hopefully everything here with Carson Beck, same deal. He's going to be recovering ahead of schedule. Cristobal said that about Carson Beck, that Miami wanted him for a lot of reasons, and that he can take mental reps even if he misses spring football, that he wants to be present and do everything he can. Cristobal said you watch him on tape. He had an elite year in 2023 and a very good year in 2024. There is some system carryover. He's athletic. He plays smart. He's got superior arm talent. He's accurate. He can extend plays, can sit in the pocket, and he runs well. He's a great human being, Coach Cristobal added. He wants to be great, and one of the best qualities is he wanted to be here at Miami. Now, I had the opportunity, and I will do so again on Thursday, to guest co-host the Joe Rose Show. Joe Rose is on vacation. His show, of course, is a South Florida sports radio staple on 560 WQAM in Miami. And on the Joe Rose Show this morning, we interviewed Kyle Krabs, who works at this awesome Locked On network. Kyle not only hosts Locked On Dolphins, but he also hosts Locked On NFL Scouting. And I know I can always count on Kyle for having impeccable scouting reports on NFL draftees. And of course, Carson Beck was for a couple of weeks declared for the NFL draft. He withdrew his name from the draft and he transferred to Miami. So I asked Kyle Krabs on WQAM this morning what Miami Hurricanes fans should expect from Carson Beck at the U. Here's what he said.
He's got better tools than I think a lot of people assume. As far as, I think he's got a good arm. I think he's a good athlete. He can get off his spot. But he's somebody who really struggled this past year without, he had Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers in 2023 as like the premier safety blankets that he had in the passing game. And he had great rapport with those guys. He had great chemistry with those guys. And there'd be tight window throws that he'd make and trust those guys to make adjustments at the catch point, and they would do it. And then those guys leave, and the pass-catching group, you could tell it just wasn't the same as far as there's not a lot of guys that are creating separation, so he has to try tight window throws, and the guys aren't adjusting at the catch point, so the production's down, and then they're getting behind the sticks more often, and teams are able to confuse him. You can really confuse him with simulated pressures, with rushing for, but keeping him in the pocket and forcing him to, if you can attack the protection scheme, he'll make bad decisions with the ball. So for a team like Miami that has the Cristobal special with all these powerhouses on the offensive line, and they have the ability to run the ball, I think it makes it a very dangerous combination, provided he gets the right kind of chemistry with one or two of the guys that are catching the football from him.
All right, so let's talk about the keys there, and that was Kyle Krabs with me this morning on WQAM on how Carson Beck can find success in Miami, and when it comes to developing chemistry, which receivers and tight ends he needs to develop chemistry with. And when we come back, we're also going to talk about a new 2027 verbal commit. I know it's a couple years down the road, but this is a really good one. You want to keep it locked right here. We'll talk more Carson Beck when we come back on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Guys, after that holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, Wayfair has everything you need all within your budget. I'm currently looking for furniture, and their huge selection at Wayfair makes it easy to find pieces that fit my style and budget. My favorite part, the free and hassle-free delivery, even for the larger items. Wayfair's site was so easy to navigate, and I found everything I needed in no time. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, you can check out our guy Spencer McLaughlin on Locked On College Football. Championship game less than a week away. I was on with Spencer on, was it Monday? The days all run together. I think it was on Monday. I was on with Spencer talking about Carson Beck to Miami. So I am a frequent guest on the Locked On College Football podcast, and Spencer does a pretty awesome job with that. All right, so you heard what Kyle Krabs mentioned about Beck. Why his game. He still was very good in 2024, but the game fell off a little bit from the previous year. A lot of that had to do with the talent. Nobody had more wide receiver drops in 2024 than Georgia. The offensive line was not as good, and he lost McConkey and Brock Bowers from the year prior, who were receivers he built big-time chemistry with. And so, as Krabs, mentioned, Beck seems to be walking into a very good offensive line situation. Miami's O-line should be in really good shape. I mean, bringing in James Brockermeyer to play center after losing Zach Carpenter, I wouldn't expect any drop-off at the center position. And, at left tackle, Jalen Rivers is moving on to the NFL, but we were a little bit fortunate that, and unfortunately for Rivers, he missed a lot of time in 2024, but that was kind of fortunate for Miami's future because Markel Bell had the opportunity to get so much experience starting about half the season at left tackle. And, Bell is fully equipped for next year. And then, Miami returns the likes of Inez Cooper and CeCe Maui Noah, who are two of the top offensive linemen in the country, especially CeCe, who's probably going to be a first-round draft pick in 2026. I wish he could stay with us a little bit long. Well, he could if he wanted to, but he's probably going to be getting first-round draft grades by the end of next year. So the O-line is good. In terms of building receiver chemistry, I am encouraged by what I'm already seeing with Beck seemingly really getting to know CJ Daniels, who's also coming in as a transfer from LSU, and other Miami weapons, because I think, the experience, CJ is another guy, final year of college, last year of eligibility. Beck and CJ can hopefully really lean on one another. It's no secret. I think Elijah Lofton is going to be one of the most versatile tight ends in the country this coming year, and he's going to step into a starring role with Elijah Arroyo going off to the NFL. I'm very encouraged with what I've been seeing from JoJo Trader. I'm looking forward to seeing more of guys like Ray Joseph and Nye Carr and Chance Robinson. Miami does have a talented trio of true freshman receivers coming in. We talked about that yesterday with Brian Smith. And, it's not always easy for true freshman receivers to break into the rotation because there's a lot that comes with that, having to block as well in the running games and the screen games and stuff. But, maybe Joshua Moore with his body type, or Malachi Toney with just his overwhelming athleticism and speed and versatility may be able to get a little bit of burn this year. And there's an expectation around college football. People are talking about it and speculating about it that, another big name receiver, a proven commodity somewhere, could still decide to transfer to Miami, likely in the spring transfer portal window, which opens up in April. So Hurricanes may not be done acquiring talent. And, between now and next season, it is imperative that Beck, obviously he wants to succeed this year because this is his final year of college, wants to raise his NFL draft stock the way that Cam Ward just did. So he's got to really build chemistry, and hopefully we see 7 or 8 different guys contribute catching passes, but it's usually that key 2 or 3 that the quarterback builds that extra chemistry with, the chemistry that Cam Ward had with guys like Xavier Restrepo and Elijah Arroyo and Isaiah Horton this past year, who are all no longer with the program. So we're going to need Carson Beck to build chemistry with guys like that. And, someone who's going to be eventually playing receiver at Miami. He's not going to play with Carson Beck, but Miami last night landed a 2027 verbal commitment. And this is someone, I know 2027 is a long way down the road, but this is a really impressive high school football player. Has played at St. Thomas Aquinas, but he actually just transferred to American Heritage. And that's wide receiver Amari Stevens, 5'11", 165 pounds. Obviously, he's just finished his junior year, sophomore year in college. Yeah, I think sophomore year. Math is not my strong point. So he's still got plenty of time to add more size and weight before he would arrive at the University of Miami. But something that Amari Stevens already has going for him is complete blazing speed, 10.8 100-meter time, and a 4.39 40-yard dash is what's reported for him. At St. Thomas Aquinas this past season as a sophomore, so he's not even an upperclassman there at one of the best programs, high school programs in the country, finished with 44 catches for 550 yards and a team-leading 8 touchdown receptions. He was doing that as a sophomore. And so he goes from one talent factory at STA to another talent factory at American Heritage. So I'm sure his development is going to continue over the next couple of seasons. And, good for Miami landing a verbal commitment very early from someone who comes from, I guess you could say, 2 really important high school pipelines in the area, because St. Thomas Aquinas, where he was playing, and American Heritage, where he will play, are two of the most prominent high school programs in the entire country. Now, I know what people are saying. They're like, well, 2027, Donno, this guy, you know how high school recruiting is, he say. This guy is going to decommit and flip like 20 times before he actually signs. I mean, obviously that happens a lot in this day and age, but this, to me, it underlines how important it is to have a forward-thinking coaching staff and to recruit guys several years in advance. Because guess what? If you don't start recruiting guys until they're going to be available the next cycle, you've already set yourselves up to fail. And as far as the idea that, you know, this young man or any young man could, you know, decommit and flip 20 times before they sign, to Amari Stevens' credit, he seems like a Canes lifer. And, you know, I know that doesn't always work out for Miami, the guys who grow up rooting for, I think Jeremiah Smith grew up a Miami fan. But you know, in the case of Amari Stevens, he talked about how he's been a Miami fan, I think, for his entire life. He's always dreamed about playing for the U. So, you know, hopefully this one sticks, and credit to Miami for getting in very early on this young man's recruitment, because already through his sophomore year in high school is a dynamic playmaker. I mean, if as a 16-year-old, if he's already leading St. Thomas Aquinas in touchdown receptions and one of their most prominent playmakers, you would imagine that 2 years down the road, he's going to be incredibly important for American Heritage. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Make sure to smash that thumbs up button, hit that like button, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to the audio version on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Odyssey app, wherever you get your pods. And we're going to talk to you guys again tomorrow. We'll do some questions and answers tomorrow. Make sure you sign up for the Locked On Canes Insiders Chat. Try it free for 14 days. Click the link in the show description below. We'll talk to you tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.